Hello guys, what's up? Welcome back to Coder's Journey. This is the second episode of our, result of T pattern in Visual Studio and C Sharp. Uh, in the previous episode, what we did was to implement this pattern from scratch. But in this video and in the upcoming videos, I am going to make use of a NuGet package developed by Steve Smith. It is called result or dallas.result. And we're going to use like web APIs with controllers to see the different advantages of using this package. So basically this package has the code that we implemented in the previous video inside of it. Uh, and of course, it has some other options as well that we are going to see little by little. So I hope you enjoy watching this video, and I hope you stay till the end of this video. Back to our note. So section 2, right? Result-oriented programming. In modern software development, sometimes we want to handle operations that could result in a success or failure state. More often than not, what junior developers do is that they try to use a flag, a Boolean flag, as the result of that operation. And then they check if the value of that flag is true, it means that the operation was successful. If the flag is false, it means that something went wrong. But the problem with this, if you remember here, I made a note of this, right? The problem with this approach is that by just looking at that flag, you cannot determine the reason why the operation failed. So that flag doesn't convey enough information. The result and result of T, basically what these do is that whenever the operation fails, they return an error message that you can check to see why the operation failed, right? So that is one good advantage. Another advantage is the clarity of your code. So here, if you go through my code or in the program.cs where I have used this invoice service, there are no try-catch blocks. There are no exceptions being thrown. Of course, here I have, the option of throwing exceptions, or as I told you before, I can also make use of guard clauses. So not having to use exceptions, not having to use try-catch for the operations that could result in a failure, like for example, fetching some data from database, are again among the other advantages of using the result pattern. And of course, the fact that you can observe, you can like read the error messages that are returned when a failure result is returned to understand what went wrong. So this is one big advantage compared to returning like a Boolean result from an operation. So this is the scenario that we want, right? So consider a common task within a marketing department, processing invoice. When the marketing campaign concludes, an invoice needs to be processed. The operation can have various outcomes. It might succeed, meaning that the invoice was finalized. It could fail because, for example, the customer information was invalid or some issues happened. So instead of relying on some Boolean flags or exceptions to signal success or failure, we can leverage the result pattern. And the implementations of result can also, help us to define custom statuses. So in the previous, video, we saw that our result could have two statuses, right? Success or failure. But with the Dallas package, we will discuss this. It is possible to create custom, statuses based on your business requirements. Like for example, invalid invoice data, campaign not found, and so on. A prevalent pattern in API development involves using exceptions to determine the appropriate HTTP status code to return from an endpoint. For instance, argument exception might lead to 400 bad requests. Null reference exception could return 500 internal server error. By using exceptions for controlling the flow of the logic cannot be a very good option. I told you we're going to make use of our Dallas.result, a NuGet package developed by Steve Smith. And we're not going to use the result implementation that we created in the previous episode, because this our Dallas.result has some other advantages and options that I want to discuss. And of course, it helps us to move towards functional programming, and the library provides a result implementation that can be seamlessly mapped to common ASP.NET MVC responses. We will see these in the later episodes. So in my solution here in Visual Studio, I have created another branch. End of episode 2. This is episode 2. I'm going to make a commit at the end of the video and push to my repository, my GitHub repository. I am going to create a web API project. I'm going to call it piruz.payroll.api. And I want it to have controllers. So use controllers. I don't want open API. I don't have anything to do with Spire right now. HTTPS makes sense. Container support, maybe later. I'm going to create this. So as you can see, we've got this controller, right? Weather forecast controller that I'm going to rename to like invoice controller later. But before we do that, I am going to create a folder here called entity or domain. I want to take my invoice, paste it here. This is the namespace, API entity, right? So ID, amount, customer name. Of course, we could have other properties as well. Then we're going to create a service. And inside of this service class, I'm going to create a public service class. So I'm going to call it invoice service. It's going to have a method called finalize invoice that is going to return a result of invoice, right? And as I told you, we are going to make use of our Dallas.result in a moment. So suppose here we take in the invoice ID, for example, and then we try to fetch our invoice from the database using, for example, a repository of some sort. We're not going to implement a repository here because I want to concentrate on this, pattern, result pattern. I'm going to generate this method here back to our node, this method, because I want to move a little bit rapidly. I'm going to paste this guy here. So get invoice is going to return an invoice. And I'm going to make use of our, so this is going to return an invoice. And this is going to return void, and it's going to get this new name. Save invoice to some database. We could have a repository. We could have like entity framework. But we're not going to do any of that here. Just going to say in a real application, this would save to a database. Invoice ID, right? So if you take a look here, let me zoom out. If you take a look here, first we're fetching the invoice based on its ID from the database. If it's null, we're not going to return false. We're not going to throw exceptions. We're going to return the result of invoice, but a not found result. Then we are going to check the amount. If it is less than 0, we are going to say return result of invoice invalid. Invoice amount must be greater than 0. And then if these two checks pass, then we're going to set the status of the invoice to finalize. We're going to save it to the database, and we're going to return a success result of invoice with the invoice inside of it. And I guess for invoice, we also need to set the status, string status, right? And now here, I'm going to go to my NuGet packages, and I'm going to search for Ardalas result. Ardalas result ASP.NET Core. I'm going to install this one because this is this looks more promising, and I know that it contains some other types that I can use when I want to work with controllers. Anyway, it's going to install the Ardalas.result as well, and it's going to install Ardalas result ASP.NET Core. So I'm going to install these two. The type or namespace result could not be found. Now I can use Ardalas.result. Now I try to fetch my invoice from the database. If it fails, if invoice is null, what I am going to return is not null. I'm going to return a result. A what? A result of invoice, but a not found result. I'm going to talk about this. Again, another if invoice.amount is less than 0, again, I'm going to return a result of invoice invalid. If you remember, invoice amount must be greater than 0. It says, so validator error params validator. So it takes in a validator. What about this one? The error, list of errors, one overload, unavailable. So we need to talk about these different statuses or return methods that Ardalas.result offers. But for now, I am going to go with not found as well. So I am going to take a look at not found. Not found has one overload, so maybe it also takes in a message. Not found, yes, it is possible to pass in an error message, which I'm happy with for now. And if these are okay, I'm going to say invoice status. Status. Okay. I'm going to say status to finalized. I'm going to save invoice to database. And then I'm going to return the result of invoice success. Does it take in like a message? String success message. So invoice of value, I can return invoice and then say, for example, let's say invoice was added successfully. So if I take a look at this result, which is coming from the Ardalas NuGet package, there are different methods, and as you can see here, we have the status as well here. Take a look at result status. These are the different statuses that we can have. Okay, created, error, and so on. Let's get back to this class. So these are the different properties that we can make use of, that we can use based on our operation, based on the result of our operation. Previously, in the result class that we created in the previous episode, we had like success and failure. Right now we have a whole bunch of different statuses that we can uh, take advantage of. Now let's move on to the invoice service. And this is our note. So in this example, the finalize invoice method from our hypothetical invoice service returns a result of invoice. This clearly indicates whether the operation succeeded or not. If so, what it is returned is like a result of success with the finalized invoice inside of it. If it fails, the result will try to return not found, invalid, or any other meaningful result. If you remember, invalid here takes in validation things that I don't want to deal with right now. But if you take a look, it wants some validation errors. So I can, for example, come here and create a new validation error. And for validation error, I have a string message. I can say, what was it here? Invoice amount must be greater. Is it invoice? Yes. I can put this guy over here. So my point is that based on your business requirements, based on the meaning that you want to convey to your consumers of your API, you can use these different methods from the result pattern result class coming from the Ardalis.result NuGet package. That's a wrap for this video. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. If that's the case, please make sure you give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Till the next episode, bye-bye.